Hi, I'm Katherine. Welcome to my new channel, Empowered Empaths and Sensitive Souls. And I'm here, come to you from the Blue Mountains in Australia, so Sydney, Australia. I wanted to talk to you today about the importance of developing systems to support working with your spiritual gifts and spiritual team. So, as intuitive empaths and sensitive people, we have spiritual gifts. We have intuitive gifts that are, unique to each of us. Although there's particular intuitive gifts, and we have our own unique mixture of intuitive and spiritual gifts, which are amazing and really help us to tap into the positive side of being an intuitive empath and sensitive soul. So, I wanted to talk about that. And I wanted to talk about the importance of having systems in place. They don't need to be complex systems. It can just be a few simple steps that you do before working with your gifts, that are part of your life, that are integrated in your life, and especially when you're working, just before you're working intuitively or around your intuitive and healing work. So I wanted to talk about some of the things that I found work really well for me, a little bit about my journey with developing my gifts. And just, speak about this important topic. So I'm seeing many people in my community, many intuitive empaths and sensitive people working with their spiritual gifts. And I love seeing that because, as my experience is that as we do work with our gifts and, begin to consciously call in the support of our spiritual team and communicate with them, ask them, different members of our team, to help with healing or guidance for ourselves and others. It's so empowering. It's just like it opens up a whole new world. And, for me, as I started to more consciously work with my spiritual team, develop my spiritual gifts, I just felt so much more confident, so much more empowered and supported. And I continue to, it's a journey. It's like it doesn't stop. It just continues. So I love sharing about that journey, this journey of developing your gifts and working with your team, to hopefully contribute some points that'll be helpful to you, to encourage, inspire, and help you to be working with your gifts and your team in ways that build your confidence, build your trust in yourself, that you're receiving accurate information, that you know who you're talking to, communicating with. All of these are really important. And some of the reasons that intuitive empaths don't always fully develop their gifts, because they don't trust themselves. They don't trust the information they're receiving, however they're receiving it. I've heard this so many times. It would be the key factor reason why people don't develop their gifts, because they're like, oh, is this true? Am I just making this up? Yeah. I've heard people say this so many times, and I know for myself, my experience was I'm very clairsentient and claircognizant. My other gifts are also active, but the strongest has always been clairsentient and claircognizant. So I would just know things. Being clairsentient, I would pick up a lot of information through my senses, through my body, and just feel stuff. And that was the more challenging gift for me, because I would be picking up so much information, feelings, a lot of information in my body, especially just feeling stuff from other people and not really knowing what that meant. I would receive intuitive messages and not know where they came from. So, that's a place that I see a lot of people in. And even for people that are already, working with their guides and team. I think some of the points that I want to talk about having a system in place can be really helpful wherever you are on that timeline of developing your gifts, to help you be more confident, to know who you're receiving information from, who's helping you with guidance or healing. This is key. I found this is so key. No matter whether you're a beginner or you're really experienced and been working with your team for ages, some of these points I feel are really key. And even to very experienced people, just something to think about. Points from my experience. So I began actively developing my gifts through reading the Akashic Records, learning to read the Akashic Records and work with the Akashic Records, through also using a pendulum, which was great for me as a clairsentient person, that I could get those initially yes and no answers, that I could check information. I really love the pendulum as a sort of go-to tool for checking information and receiving specific information, asking questions. So something I can talk more about in another video. I can talk more about a pendulum. So about pendulum dowsing. So yeah, I'm just thinking I'll write a little note for myself to make a video about pendulum dowsing. So I've got that. So I don't just say I'm making a video about pendulum dowsing, it doesn't happen. Okay, great. So yeah, I began my journey with really developing my intuitive gifts, with learning to read the Akashic Records, learning to work with the Akashic Records, and specifically working a lot with the pendulum. Now, the great thing about the way that I learned, and I learned from a couple of teachers, then I also learned, because I'm very much a healer, I learned from other different teachers, and healing from methods from other different teachers. And that's all part of the systems that I use to support me in working with my spiritual gifts and spiritual team. So the thing about the way that I learned initially was that it's very systematic, and I realized the benefits of that. So these are some of the things I want to talk about that came from learning in a very systematic way, that I think really has benefits, a lot of benefits, that perhaps people that learn more organically, that might work really well for some people. But for other people, when there's not systems in place, I'm seeing that they perhaps don't know who they're actually receiving information from. I've seen this so much, that people are just receiving information, then suddenly information's coming from somewhere else, and that isn't high vibration information aligned with divine love, light, and truth. But this interference is happening, like they're on this on a radio and there's interference kicking in for them. It's happening a lot. Or you see with all the channeling out there, are people actually receiving channeled messages from the archangels or whoever they say they are, or are they not? How do you know? So again, topics to explore more deeply in another video, but this is a general video, just talking about some of the key elements that you might want to consider in terms of putting together a simple system to support you using your spiritual gifts and working with your team. So some of the key elements that I found are opening and closing. So in working with the Akashic Records, and I think this applies to any ways of opening up into your gifts for intuition, receiving intuitive information, or for healing, we want an opening and closing process. It can be really simple, but you want an opening and closing process. So that might be, setting the space, creating sacred space, calling in your team. So that's similar to the Akashic Records. I'm opening into the Akashic Records, calling in my team. And then when I finish, I'm saying thank you, closing the Akashic Records, and my team go on their way. So we want opening and closing. This is good psychic hygiene. Otherwise, we're walking around with our crown chakra fully open all the time and our psychic senses fully open, and it's too much. So, of course, our senses are open to some degree all the time, but we want to have those times when we're really, this is my perspective, when we're really opening, receiving that information, working with our team, and then we have a closing process. Good psychic hygiene that ensures, that you're looking after yourself and you're not walking around too open all the time. So the second point is checking the light score and the consciousness sovereignty. I found this is key for myself and for my teaching. So what do I mean by the light score and the consciousness sovereignty? So the light score is the measure of, this term's used by a few people. The light score is the measure of light and dark energy. It's a term used for that. So really pendulum dowsing or some sort of muscle testing could check this. So I found that you want to be keeping your light score up 98, 99, 100. Otherwise, you're not in that like high spiritual alignment. Generally, if people, for most of us, that's our natural, who are starseeds, intuitive empaths, sensitive people, we're naturally high light, full of light beings, star beings. And so our light score is naturally really high. There's different reasons why it could be lower. So it's just a score. It doesn't, there's more in-depth information that can be needed as to, it's not a judgment about yourself or someone else. It's a simple test that you can just see what's happening. So keeping your light score up 98, 99, 100 lets you know if there's some major interference that's interfering with your light, the light energy in your field, with a lot of dark energies. Could be from cords attachments from other people or some type of dark entities, or could be curses, spells, things like that with a lot of dark energy. That's a couple of things that could lower the light score. Trauma. Type of trauma can leave openings to create openings and emotion that can lower the energy too. The light score too. Emotions can, being a lot of emotional reaction, things can, entities and things can attach to that too. So the light score is a simple measure that just lets you know, okay, I'm going, my energy is reasonably clear. I'm ready to work. Because if the light score is lower, that means you've got stuff in your field that can interfere with, channeling or receiving accurate information, tapping into working at that high vibrational level that is necessary to access higher, to access the Akashic Records, access, be able to meet energetically those higher vibration spiritual team members like angels and masters, archangels. Our vibration needs to be clear and high. The consciousness sovereignty. Consciousness sovereignty. So while our energy is connected at some level with all that is, we also want our energy field to be a certain amount contained in integrity. So we're not just having, of course, there's always a flow with universal energy. We want to have some openness to that, but not but having a certain integrity in the energy um, so as there's not essentially interference from other beings that you didn't invite in interfering with your channeling or guidance. So as you're only allowing what you're inviting in. Having the high consciousness sovereignty supports receiving clear information. I hope that makes sense. So you also, I found, want the conscious sovereignty up to 98, 99, 100, which allows, it can be, with both these scores, there can be a little bit of stuff going on, but you can still hold your energy, your light, and be receiving that accurate information. So spiritual practice is the next point I wanted to make. I found this is essential to maintaining, again, something for another video. In fact, I'm doing a whole masterclass about this. It's really, really important. So you want a spiritual practice, a daily practice that supports you to stay in spiritual alignment, to be grounded, to be sort of develops a strong core, to be in your center, present, things like that. General things that people talk about with the spiritual practice. So everyone's different. So the type of spiritual practice that works for you is the one that works for you. That, you know, and in the masterclass, I'm going to talk about, you know, some of the key elements I feel are that need to be part of a spiritual practice. As I mentioned, grounding and being centered and, you know, a clear energy field, your spiritual alignment. So whatever works for you to support you living your life, support you with working with your intuitive gifts, with healing, with working with your team. The spiritual practice is essential for, it's a maintenance, to maintain your energy in alignment, essentially. So that might be yoga, it might be meditation, it might be mantra, some other type of practice that is your daily practice, that is your spiritual practice, that just keeps you, you know, in tune and at that in a high vibration state, keeps you or maintains your spiritual alignment. The next point I wanted to make is getting to know your guides. So the way that I learned was to ask some questions from my guides. So using a pendulum to, and I often use charts. So I have charts of some different soul groups. And this isn't necessary. We could ask different questions of our guides. I'm just giving an example from the way that I do it, is to just see which star systems, rather than soul group, we use the word star systems, that the guides come from. They might come from the angelic realm. They might come from, not be Pleiadian, or they might be Syrian, Arcturian. So, you know, which star system do your guides come from? You know, that's a great question to ask. What another one that I like is what's the vibrational, like which dimension are they working from? Are they working from, you know, common ones might be seventh dimension, or you know, another dimension. Which dimension are they working at? They might be working in a much higher dimension. People can have guides from very high dimensions. So it gives you some idea of the sort of vibrational level the guides communicating from. Are they aligned with divine love, light, and truth? Again, I use my pendulum, could use my pendulum to measure this, that the guide is aligned with divine love, light, and truth. So getting to know each of your team members. How many spiritual guides do you have on your team? And one of the questions I've learned to ask, are there any negative guides that aren't in alignment with your highest path and purpose? and clearing those negative guides, having systems to clear negative guides, right? So you know you're working with guides, spiritual guides that are aligned with your highest path and purpose. So similarly with your other team members, asking questions. So do you see how this is getting really specific? So I find a lot of people can say things like, oh, I received that from my guides, but you know, who are your guides? So I really always encourage people to ask questions, to know who they're working with in each moment, to know, okay, I'm working with this guide now. You know, this guide's an Arcturian. This guide helps me with you know, this area generally. This guide helps me with guidance about my purpose. This guide helps me with healing, things like that. So other questions you can ask. This guide helps me with what, you know. So you know who you're working with. Similarly with other team members, masters, angels, archangels, you know, who are you working with? So asking some questions, having a list perhaps of, you know, the different masters. This is what I do. I have a list of the different masters. And so I can see who I'm working with. I can check, and sometimes a new master will show up and I'll ask who that is, and I sometimes might receive a name, or I might you know, work out who that is in another way. It might just come to me, or sometimes it, you know, takes a little longer to receive that information in another way, who that master is. Also asking questions, having a list. These all work. So you know who you're working with. Which of the archangels are you working with? What do they help you with? You know, each of the masters and angels, archangels might, you know, often help with different things, different aspects of your work in life. So getting to know your team members, and then when you're working, knowing who you're working with, rather than this more natural approach of just whoever is there, you know, and you just don't really know. Similarly, you can actually check the vibrational, which dimensional vibration that team members primarily vibrating at. You can check the alignment with divine love, light, and truth. Why would you do that with a master or archangel? Because there are some deceptive beings out there. So some people think they're working with the archangels. They may not be. So they can actually check if it doesn't feel right, if they have some doubt, or, you know, just checking as you begin to work more consciously with your team to be, you know, having that conversation of who you're working with, just checking. You know, it's not, to me, it's not offensive to your team members to ask questions, to, it's responsible, it's discerning. So each of the, finally, each of our team members has an energetic signature, which we can come to recognize. And for all of us, that'll be recognized in different ways. I sometimes hear sound. I often hear frequency sounds, and they're different, but it's quite subtle. You know, they have a different, I sort of sense them at different dimensional levels, and they have a different, the presence has a different quality to it. So I sense things often in a very, clairsentient, or that's clairaudient way. Sometimes I see the team members clearly, or just as sort of not so clearly. So each of the team members has an energetic signature that we can come to recognize over time. That's sort of a language between us and them. So that's great to get to know the energetic signature for your team members. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about, and just finishing up with how beneficial I found that for myself and people that I've taught, to have some type of systems that can be quite simple for opening up, closing down, for knowing who you're working with, and for just checking that your energy is, reasonably light and clear. You have that spiritual alignment. So there's a few topics there that I can go a bit deeper into in other videos, and I look forward to sharing with you in the next video. Thank you so much for staying and listening to my video. And if you have any questions or there's anything particularly that you'd like me to talk about, you're welcome to put that in the comments. Thank you so much.